Please tell us something about yourself first.
So I'm Rishabh Kumar Rewar. I'm from Jaipur, Rajasthan. I did my graduation in BTech in Civil Engineering from IIT Delhi from the batch of 2020. And since my early childhood, I've lived in many places due to frequent transfers in my father's job. So somewhere in between, I've developed an interest in traveling and exploring new cultures. I'm also interested in quizzing and weight training.
I see, that's good. So, and you have geography as a subject, an
Yes,
optional subject, but you
yes,
did civil engineering.
yes, sir.
Hmm? Okay, okay. Now, let me start with this. With geography and civil engineering as a connected subject. What do you do for constructing a earthquake resistant building?
So there are multiple techniques that are used while designing an earthquake resistant building, and a big factor in that determination is in which how earthquake prone the zone is. And there's this a specific IS code for that, IS code 1890, through which we devise the methodologies. Some of the common techniques are: first is base isolation method, wherein the substructure is separated from the superstructure. So if there are vibrations in the ground, they aren't transferred to the above the building and the superstructure. The joints are often made flexible in those, so that the vibrations, so the energy is dissipated through the vibration of the joints.
Can you tell
Many
in
times,
simpler words for a layman? Can you use little simpler words?
yes, sir. So when the technique of base isolation is that there are some sort of a spring is attached to the base, from where the foundation of the building and the rest of the building, there are certain kinds of strong springs that are attached in the joints, and those uh, isolate the base from the rest of the structure. So when the base vibrates during the earthquake, the energy is dissipated in the springs and doesn't transfer to the rest of the building. So that makes the building more resistant to earthquakes.
I mean, how much amplitude it can take, how much vibration?
So I'm not aware of the numbers, but that depends on what sort of base isolation methods you used. Many a times
Because the
there
isolation
are,
method you have to use in Japan may not be same as you have to use in Delhi.
yes,
So in Delhi, for that matter, is zone 4 and Japan is zone 5 for that matter. Do
yes.
you think the base isolation method will be there in both places, or in Delhi some simpler thing can be done?
So while designing the building, if you are making a new building, we can employ the base isolation method. However, many a times the old buildings are need to be retrofitted to make them more earthquake resistant. In that instance, we can't use the technique of base isolation. We have other methods as well. For instance, the columns and the beams that are present in the already present building, they are jacketed with extra steel girders so that they are made more strong. Many times there are traditional techniques as well. For example, in the houses in Kashmir, we see the buildings are made of wood, so that it's a light material and therefore it is better able to absorb and causes less
Yeah,
damage.
that's right. But if you have to go multi-story like Japan, you can't make the building of wood.
Yes, sir.
So you have to use some other technique, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Achha, now what are P waves and what are S waves? Can we detect P waves or S waves?
So P waves and S waves are body waves, and P stands for primary, S stands for secondary, and these are the waves that are generated when there is any tremor, and when an earthquake occurs. So P wave, these waves can be detected. P wave is the more is the wave that is detected first. It's the faster traveling wave, and after some time lag, we can also detect the S wave, and these can help somewhat
So can you
in
use this P
predicting.
wave and S wave? Suppose you can detect P wave and S wave. Can you organize your relief and evacuation after getting the detecting these waves?
So there is a very less time lag once you detect these waves, because the surface waves that follow after the P and S waves, the Rayleigh waves and the Love waves, these are the ones that cause the huge amount of damage. But there's a very short time.
What is that?
Sorry,
How short it is? How short?
Sir, I'm not exactly aware of the
In
exact
seconds,
time, but
in minutes, or minutes or hours?
so it's in a matter of minutes. Also, it depends on what is the topography of the region, because the body waves travel through across the crust. However, the surface waves only travel through the surface. So, what is the topography that changes the time?
Okay, epicenter concept you must be aware. Huh?
Yes.
So suppose epicenter is 5 kilometers down in one place, and another place it is 10 kilometers down. What will be difference in impact in these two places?
Sir, as per my knowledge, epicenter is the point on the surface above the focus, so it is not up or down. It is the focus that is 5 kilometers down and 10 kilometers down.
Okay,
So,
take focus. You are a student of geography, I'm not. So take the focus as my question. You replace epicenter by focus.
So, a deeper earthquake causes more often than not causes more damage to the infrastructure. Deep-seated earthquakes are usually much more powerful, and they have a more wide-ranging impact as
Suppose
compared
power
to
is
the
the same
shallow
in both.
earthquakes.
Suppose power is same in both. How will you compare the impact on the ground?
So, if the power is same, I believe the shallow earthquake might have more damage. However, I'm not exactly sure.
So do you have any concept of solid angle? The area affected, in which one area will be affected?
Sir, in the deep focus earthquake, more area will be affected.
Why? It's much deeper.
So as you mentioned the concept of solid angle. So
Yeah,
if we
that's
take
right.
the three.
Now tell me something else.
Yes.
There is a question of rule of law, and yesterday there was a report that the rule of law in UP has a lot of appreciation, has got a lot of appreciation. By the way, what is this rule of law?
So rule of law is a concept that states that governance or administration is through a law and not by the decree of one person, and everyone has to follow that law.
Just this. What are the elements? This is one element you told me. Rule of law is the rule governance through as per the law. Is there any
So
other element of this?
So that no person is above the law. Everyone is
That's
equal
right.
in front
No
of the
one
law.
is above the law, and the governance is done as per law. Anything else?
Sorry, sir, I'm able to recall only these at the moment.
So there are distinct elements of rule of law. Have you heard of Digital India programs?
Yes, sir.
What are these? What were various activities taken up in Digital India mission?
So Digital India program is more of an umbrella program that aims to digitize India. It aims to use digital technologies in various aspects of finance, of governance, etc., and also to increase the internet connectivity to the people. The
So there
programs
are specific names. About nine points are there. 9 activities are there. There are 9 programs in this mission. Do you have any idea?
So I can recall a few. BharatNet would be one of the programs.
BharatNet is one of them, yes.
And
okay.
I'm unable to think of
So let's discuss BharatNet. I mean, remaining you can see later on after this intro. In BharatNet, what has been done? Do you have any details?
Yes, sir. So the objective was to connect all the gram panchayats of the country with internet connectivity, and I'm not
and it has
exactly
been
sure.
completed. And it has
No,
been
sir.
done.
So last I read almost 1.5 lakh villages were connected, and around 50,000 or more were left. I'm not exactly sure of the numbers.
How many villages are there in India? Do you have any idea?
Uh, I'm not aware of the exact number,
So
but
just
I think
have
it
a look.
is.
I think it is about 6 lakh, 6.5 lakh or something. So if it 1 point something has been, that means a large area has to be covered, isn't it?
Yes.
Still. Now suppose the entire area is covered through that. All panchayats have been given connectivity through optical cables. Now you as administrator of a district, you go there and you see that this infrastructure is available. How this infrastructure can be used by you to improve efficiency, governance, and public welfare.
So, firstly, that since the Gram Panchayat is connected by high-speed internet, the coordination with the different levels of government can be better with the district, with the state government. So, the ground level bottom-up data can be presented better. Up-down,
Well, you are
the
telling
instructions
very
that are given can be.
general issues. Give me specific programs where the people can be benefited. Specific things. The government departments, if they are not coordinating today, tomorrow also they may not, unless some mechanism is put in place. So I'm talking about what exactly areas where it will benefit and what mechanism can be put to use.
So, for example, the drive to have EPOS systems in the PDS that can be made more available to the people. So, if the Gram Panchayat is connected, we can have certain centers that are connected to the that are connected digitally, and the PDS system can be more streamlined. Second, there are many schemes by ISRO as well to connect the villages and provide more weather data and agriculture related data, so that
Okay, I mean,
uh,
leave. I think you're going the other line. You come from Rajasthan. Tell
yes.
me two most important things that need to be done in Rajasthan. Two important things in a particular district, in any district for that matter. The two areas which are most neglected. Which could be those areas?
So the first is the availability of water in most of the districts in Rajasthan.
Anything
Sec-
else?
Second is the social sector in Rajasthan, especially regarding the status of women. That is
What
also
is
very
social
neglected.
sector? Is very vast. Give me exact.
So, from the gender dimension, the education, healthcare of women
So
is.
you've got the idea. Education, healthcare, and for that matter, you say water in case of Rajasthan. Okay. Now, is there anything that can be done using these platforms, this connectivity?
Yes, sir. There's huge scope.
Why it
Telemedicine,
didn't? Why it
tele-education.
didn't occur to you as a
Uh,
collector? That is the most important thing that you should be really looking at. What is Griha rating, by the way?
so, Griha rating is a rating by the tele organization that uh, measures the energy efficiency of a building, whether it is a green building or not, on certain parameters.
So where it is used, by the way?
Sir, it is used in the building construction in uh, to to gauge whether a
In
building is green building or not.
so if you make a house, are you going to do Griha rating?
Uh, no, sir.
Who
I
will
think it
use
is.
this?
So it is. In my opinion, it is used in the commercial buildings. I'm not exactly
Commercial
sure.
buildings or government projects?
Sir, in government projects also it can be used because the ECBC code, the when the ECBC code was brought in, the concept of GRIA was attached to that they should be monitored through the GRIA framework.
So being a civil engineer, can you tell me one thing? What is the biggest discovery of the 19th century, or you can call it 20th century, in a building? The biggest thing that has happened that in every building it is available. And without that, life would have been miserable. Can you think of anything?
Sir, elevators.
No. What about single floor? Elevators are
So,
not there.
yes, sir, but then our real estate sector wouldn't have picked up if elevators aren't constructed, wouldn't be having any high-rise
No,
buildings.
I'm talking about not the real sector. What about toilets? Flush toilets.
So they are also
If they were
completely
not
wrong.
there, what would have been the life in cities particularly?
Yes, sir.
Hmm? So that didn't occur to you.
Rishabh,
Hello, sir.
hello. You are from Rajasthan and you did civil engineering. You have got a subject geography. Tell me,
Yes, sir.
these areas, Rajasthan, Haryana, Delhi. These areas are considered to be the water deficit, and it is said that in couple of decades, there would not be any water for us to drink. So, what is the solution?
So there can be multiple solutions, region-specific solutions on both the demand side of water and the supply side of water. For example, firstly taking the supply side, many of these regions, especially Western Rajasthan, doesn't get good rainfall. So there have been many traditional water harvesting structures that can be refurbished and redeveloped. For example, Baudis and Tankas that are disused at the moment can be used again so as to have more water storage. On the demand side, we can again have multiple measures. Firstly, that people should realize the value of water. They shouldn't waste water unnecessarily in their household activities. Grey water should be reused in gardening and other similar activities. There can be in many areas the concept of water metering is also starting because much of these regions are not connected through water. Water is not chargeable. They pump it through their own private tube wells. So I think these small steps can be taken on both the demand and supply side so that water can be used more judiciously.
There are many experts who have suggested that India should use multiple time zones, but it has not been done yet. What do you think? What is the reason why multiple time zone is not yet adopted, and why still are we going ahead with single time zone?
So there are multiple reasons for that. Firstly, is the administrative burden it will cause because we'll have to rearrange and reprogram our systems and softwares according to different time zones. Second is that it might cause a lot of confusion in the people of India, and since many people are not very educated, they might not grasp the concept because it hasn't been practiced in India traditionally. We have only had one time zone for many decades now, so it will lead to a lot of confusion. And thirdly, it might also lead to commercial losses, especially in private businesses because they might have to they might not be able to cope with the changes suddenly. However, there was a committee a few years back that suggested the same, and it said that we should be having 3 time zones rather than 2. And so there are talks in the government. I think this idea should be explored because there's a strong demand, especially from Northeast India, and we should study the pros and cons, and then we can make a decision.
So your interest is in IFS. Why you want to become an IFS officer?
So there are multiple reasons both on the professional and the personal front. Firstly, I believe that the opportunity to represent India internationally in other countries and multilateral organization, as well as the opportunity to witness India's rise from the ring side, India's rise in the global order. I think it's a huge opportunity I would like to avail. Secondly, I'm interested in international relations, so I thought IFS is a natural choice for me. On the personal front, when I was a child, my father was posted in the Embassy of India in Muscat, and I believe the seeds of my interest in IFS were sown then. and I also like traveling and exploring new cultures. So I thought I'll be able to pursue this hobby in IFS as well.
Okay. Now that your interest is in IFS, for Indian foreign services or Indian foreign policy, what are the opportunities in 21st century and the challenges?
So there are various opportunities in the 21st century for Indian foreign policy. India is a rising power that is being acknowledged by almost all countries in its neighborhood as well as in the global high table. India is one of the largest economies. It will have the largest population in the next couple of years. It constitutes a significant amount of trade. It has a huge strategic presence in the major sea lanes of communication. Along with that, India is a party to almost all major regional and multilateral organizations and has a say in almost all international affairs. So it has multiple opportunities in the future. However, there are significant challenges. Firstly, is that in the mid to near to midterm future, we'll probably be seeing a lot more assertiveness from China. So it's a big foreign policy challenge how to deal with an assertive and rising China. Second is that India deals with faces various other tensions like cross-border terrorism, maritime security in its neighborhood, political and civil unrest in its volatile neighborhood, not very good relation with some of its neighbors. So these things have to be managed. Along with that, the geopolitical scene is changing. It's in a flux. We are moving from a unipolar order to a multipolar order, and that will bring itself a set of challenges. How does India balance between different powers, and how do we make our voice more strong for the reform of multilateral systems? So I think these would be the challenges in the near future.
Okay, Turkey has got a seaway that is called the Bosphorus Strait. So Black Sea connects the Bosphorus Sea, and that's the major trade route. But now Turkey is making an alternate canal. That's called the Istanbul Canal. What is the controversy around it?
Sorry, sir, I'm not exactly aware of the controversy around canal.
Okay, there was this ship that got stuck in Suez Canal, right?
Yes.
Ever given.
Yes.
Now, when this ship got stuck and everything was standstill, at that time there was a talk about a parallel route to connect both sides. But then there was one country which earlier, which way back had planned an alternate route. So which country is that, and what was the route?
Sir, I think you're talking about the 1956 Suez crisis. At that time, when the Suez Canal was blocked by Egypt, Israel and US had planned to make an alternate canal through the Gulf of Aqaba that connects the Mediterranean Sea, and they planned to use nuclear bombs to bomb the Sinai Desert and to make a parallel passage. However, the idea never came to fruition.
What is called this green passport?
So green passport is an instrument by the European Union that aims to give access to certain individuals who have got vaccinated so that they can travel in and out of Europe.
You talked about this multipolar world. Now, China is coming up really fast. In fact, it is considered by many strategists that this China actually is number one. However, US president decided to meet Russian president than the Chinese president. What could be the reason behind going to meet Russian president?
So there were multiple reasons of the US president and Russian president meeting. They have various bilateral issues that they discussed, and it is also believed that with some thaw in tensions between US and Russia, the US and the West aims to reduce the closing ties between Russia and China. which would be disastrous for their interests. And I believe to woo Russia towards their side, this move might have been undertaken.
Should India form Quad as a military tie-up or a military group like NATO?
No, sir. In my opinion, Quad should not be solely a military group. It has a wide array of interests, as was discussed during the summit leaders meeting of early 2021. We are working on multiple issues, and one of the major disadvantages, especially in the case of India, if the Quad becomes a military alliance, is that India is the only country that shares a land border with China. And if China feels very threatened and excluded from an exclusive grouping that formally aims to target China, India would be the country that will have to face the repercussions. And India and China also share the longest boundary dispute in the world at the moment. So I think India should be more realistic with respect to its approach, and the Quad grouping should be a forum where it should be inclusive, and various discussions and various subjects of the Indo-Pacific should be considered, not only the military aspect.
Oh, okay, Rishabh. Thank you.
Rishabh, one of your hobbies that you have mentioned is weight training.
Yes, sir.
So can you tell me how is weight training different from strength training?
So weight training is the practice of using lifting weights against the force of gravity to build muscle strength, size, shape, etc. However, strength training is a bit more specific. It focuses only on the muscle strength and not on other aspects like hypertrophy and stamina and other aspects. Whereas weight training is a more wider term.
Okay. And you have also mentioned traveling as one of your hobbies and your reasons for filling up IFS as your first option. So, can you tell me that since we are in the age of social media, right? So everyone has a tendency to post pictures when one travels. So is there an increasing disconnect from the actual aspect of travel and more of flaunting it on social media?
So I believe a generalized statement cannot be made. However, it is observed that many people, when they are traveling, they are more focused on the real life, how the place looks through the lens of a camera, rather than looking it through their own eyes, and that is a valid observation. However, many times using social media is not only for fronting; it also helps in other travelers notice what are the better places to travel to. So it has both sides.
Okay. Since you have geography as your optional and also traveling as one of your hobbies, so can you tell me how, when you, let's say, go to a place which has mountains and when you go to a beach side or near the sea, how is the impact different in both the cases?
So geography is the even though the physical aspect, the topography, the terrain, and the climate is an important part of geography. The human side of geography is also an important part while traveling.
Yes.
For example, when we are moving to mountains, we'll be packing accordingly. We'll be wearing cold clothes, and we'll have our packing would be different. If we are going to a beach, we'll be having summer clothes. However, the how that geography has defined the culture of these two places, the food cuisine, the way these people live their everyday lives, their occupations, these are also determined by geography, and that is also an important factor while we are traveling.
Okay, good. You have filled IFS on top, right? And currently we are seeing an increasing warfare in Afghanistan. And it is also reported in some sections of the media that India is engaging with Taliban, but in a backdoor manner. Now, what we are observing that Taliban is increasingly getting violent. So in that scenario, do you think it is prudent for India to even consider with engaging with Taliban rather than the civilian government over there?
So India has been engaging with the civilian government for a long time. And now it is increasingly believed that Taliban is a reality in Afghanistan. Even if we believe this reality or not, they are here to stay. And from a more pragmatic point of view, so as to preserve our national interests in the region, we should be talking and engaging with all the stakeholders in the region. And lastly, engaging and engagement with Taliban doesn't mean we are recognizing that they are the legitimate power. It should only be read as mere engagement.
Okay, okay. You graduated in civil engineering, right? So
Yes, sir.
it is also there as an optional. So why have you chosen geography over civil engineering?
So, since I was a child, I was always interested in geography. When my father used to put up maps in my room and used to look at them, I liked geography in school. However, I lost touch with geography when I took the science stream in class 11. And then, while considering an optional for UPSC, I thought, let's explore my old love for geography again. And I also believe that my study in geography would help me in becoming a better civil servant.
Okay, okay. Currently, we are observing extreme climate events, whether it's in Europe or during the winter, it was North America. And we also witnessed huge forest fires across South America, North America, even in India. So, do you think the most pressing concern for geography right now is climate change?
So, in my opinion, definitely climate change is one of the most pressing concerns for geography.
Okay. And when we see the status of floods in India, particularly the floods which are happening in Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, right? And you are a civil engineer also. Can you tell me, as an administrator, what will be your approach to increasing riverbed intrusion? Like there is a tendency of people building homes in river beds during dry seasons. So, as because since you are not yet an administrator, so as a student of engineering, what is your practical approach to it? How do you make people believe that it is not proper for you to build a home over there?
So, as you rightly noted, that many people encroach upon the river floodplain, especially in the highly populated regions of Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. So, one of the elements mentioned in the disaster management policy during floods is a proper river profile zoning, wherein there are different zones of the rivers, valley, and river plain, and accordingly construction should be done. So, in the inner two zones, there should be no construction and there should be no habitation, and people should be made to realize this, that it is not in their interest to build their homes there, because here time and again there are floods coming here and people are dying and they are losing their lives and property. And with climate change, they should be made to realize that this phenomena is going to increase much more in the future. The frequency as well as the intensity would increase. So I think there should be a grassroots campaign to ensure there's awareness. Along with that, there should law the provisions under the law should be used, that if there are any illegal constructions in those zones of the river valley, there should be proper course of the law should be undertaken and they should be penalized for that.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Rishabh.
Rishabh, your interview is over now. A little bit of feedback from our side. I think you are very confident. So I think you continue with that. The way you are talking and you made it into a conversation. I think is very good. And since you have done it in the first attempt, it's very creditable. I'm sure you'll get that advantage of that. But don't relax. When you have your interview?
The 20th of August.
20th of August. So you have about a month. Just be abreast with current affairs, particularly, and all controversial affairs, and a lot related to your subject as well as the state. I think that will take you far. Though your father is in banks, so may not be, people might even go for some questions on bank NPAs and so on and so forth. But I think that aspect, though it is a little remote, but still you can have a look at. or somebody has sees it, he might be tempted to ask some questions because of that association. Otherwise, it's fine. Good luck to you. Things up.
Thank you, sir.
Rishabh, since IFS is your first choice, first, I mean, before that, see, age is at your side. That's a huge advantage. That's a huge advantage. Many of your small mistakes would be ignored because they would appreciate that you came at such an early stage for interview, and that too in a very first attempt. So don't let it go. First attempt is probably the best attempt, and that too at this earlier stage, it's like gold mine. So go with a positive mindset. Everything is fine. Just slight modifications are needed. First thing first is that, see, when I asked you about opportunity and challenges in front of India and its foreign policy, try to bring in more holistic approach and talk about examples. Like, what are the opportunities? Opportunities are to bring in industries from China to India. West is becoming more less cost competitive. So India has got opportunity. And foreign policy, how to see, look at the foreign policy of China, how beautifully they manage. I mean, whether they are using a debt trap or whatever it is, but ultimately they have generated, because of their own foreign policy, they could generate so much of revenue and so much of business interest in across the globe. So similarly, Indian foreign policy, foreign policy stalwarts have got this opportunity to replicate or at least do something different, but then in favor of our own country. Challenges. So everything is happening. See, Americans are leaving. I'm just giving you one example. Americans are leaving Afghanistan, and there are multiple parties: China, Pakistan, Russia, America, India, Iran. So many countries are interested in Afghanistan. India has got its challenges there as well. America is backing India. I mean, indirectly, but America is backing India and its presence in Afghanistan. So there, see, if Afghanistan is stable, then India would be at peace because because of the border at POK. I did not ask questions related to every neighbor of our country, but then you need to prepare about each and every neighbor.
Yes.
Note down. I mean, create a separate sheet. Note down first write down about their history. See, every conflict or every problem in a country is more or less always related to its past. So create a brief history and then its connection with its neighbors, and then fit in India and see why this current dynamics is there and how exactly is it playing. So you got Pakistan, Afghanistan, although Afghanistan is not neighbor, but still Pakistan, Afghanistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Maldives, Middle East. Then we have got some problems and opportunities at Asian countries also. China is there, of course. Then we have got Quad group. I asked you questions related to Quad. Your answer was good, but then still very, very, you have not taken a broad perspective. I always say that, see, the biggest challenge of forming Quad as a military group is that America then would sit tight at its home and would always ask India to wage war in its place. So tomorrow you might, if Quad is a military group, tomorrow you might see India in Iraq, Syria, and everywhere. So waging America's war across the globe. So that would be, I mean, China is one thing. Probably India would be able to contain China, but then would be doing all the dirty work of America. I'm just giving you an example. So that's how you need to have a broader perspective, because IFS is your choice. This everything is fine. Think about all the problems and its solution. Note it down, write it down. Because questions would be there related to IFS. I mean, young, talented, bright guy coming for interview with all near perfect approach would be quizzed for sure. So you would be quizzed for your IFS interest and all, everything. They would have many more questions. So better prepare. The more you prepare, the best part with you is the more they ask questions, more are the chances of you getting very high marks. So you have got the opportunity to score very, very high marks. You can touch 200 plus, right? Go for it, right? Best of luck.
Rishabh, I think your content is quite good. And as Sir said, because it's your first attempt, so you have got a great scope of scoring good marks. Just one thing from my side, that you appear a little nervous now. Okay. So probably you, while answering questions, you can relax it a little bit, because see, your body language sends a message. And what I observed was that while you were talking about your hobbies, you were much more confident. And when, let's say, you were talking about your optional or foreign policy, you looked a little bit nervous. So body language sends out a message. So probably what you can try to answer questions in a little bit relaxed and a much more conversational manner, which will actually send out the message that it's not like that you are more confident in your hobbies or more confident or less confident in your optional. It will give the interviewer an impression that you are doing good, right? You are in a natural conversation. So just look at that and keep following things in international relations. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All the best, Rishabh.
Thank you, sir.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon on the YouTube app and never miss another update from Civil's Daily.